Skid plates. Some say you don't need them. We say you're just not wheeling hard enough. Here at Clayton Off Road, we offer the ultimate skid plate protection system. In front of us here is the full-length skid plate system for the 2018 to 2020 Jeep JL. Starting with the gas tank skid plate, this is the, quote, fat gas tank skid plate version. Check out our previous video where we showed you the differences between the fat tank skid and the skinny tank skid. We've got our removable skid plate extension here. We're going to be taking this out because the Jeep that is in the shop right now has our long arm kit on it. As we're moving up the skid plate here, we've got our skid support member that ties nicely into the tank skid as well as the transfer case skid. We opted to paint the provided bracket. This is a backdrop bracket for the Clayton logo. We painted ours red. Moving further up the skid here, we've got skid connection brackets that tie in nicely to the OEM crossmember. And the engine skid plate here is seen with the provided brackets. These are specific to the 2018 to 2020 Jeep JL 3.6 liter engine. Last but not least, we've got the removable oil pan dropout. Now, this skid system is going to install very similar to all the other systems that we offer. The major difference comes down to these brackets here. You can refer to our online instructions on more information regarding these brackets. So I want to emphasize here that this video is going to serve as a general guide for our full skid plate installation. Depending on your vehicle, some steps are going to vary, but you can use our online instructions, which are very detail oriented, and those get down to the nitty gritty and specifics of how to install the skid plate that you purchased to your vehicle. So without further ado, we're going to move this gas tank into the new gas tank skid plate and get this whole system installed. So Lucas and I are just going to transfer this tank over. Wait! Before you drop that tank in there, you need to install this rear bracket. This bracket feeds through the gas tank skid plate. You'll then take a countersunk 5/16 bolt, feed it through the back side. You'll then want to bring up the rear support bracket into position. Then use the supplied 5/16 washer and nylon nut. you can now tighten this bolt down. Try to keep the bolts relatively center in the slots. It's okay if it creeps off a little bit. We can start these remaining 9/16 washers and nuts on the remaining pegs. You can just keep these loose for now. We're all set. Now we can jump right back to the install. Just like that, it fits right in. So we're not going to be needing that anymore. Unlike some of our competitors on the market, we'd rather have you replace the factory protection rather than build over it. So without further ado, we're going to move the gas tank back over to the Jeep so that way we can start installing this full system. So because this Jeep has the Clayton Off Road long arm lift kit on it, this skid extension is going to be removed completely. You're just going to take a Allen key and remove these countersink bolts. There's 6 of them total. So the skid plate ships from Clayton Off Road with this extension installed. This bracket would sit right about here on any short arm lift kit or even OEM suspension. So now that we've got the tank stabilized on the adjustable jack stands, we're going to bring in our skid support member. And it's already been taped here, as you can see. We're just going to feed this under the tank very slowly. Take your time. You don't want anything to tip over. So now that the skid support member is in place, we're going to start the countersunk bolt that mates the gas tank skid plate to the skid support member. We're going to bring the whole thing up pretty slowly. You just want to make sure you're not going to pinch anything on the way up, and leave plenty of room at the top to pause and reconnect all the necessary fuel lines. Okay, so now that we have the skid plate pretty high up, Lucas is going to just, keep both hands on the skid plate, and I'm going to get up top and make those connections we talked about. So the front 2 fuel connections can be made pretty much once the skid's installed. You've got plenty of room up there. Otherwise, we've got everything connected. Now we're just going to bring the skid plate up into its mounting position, and the instructions have a great guide on which bolts to install first. That's intended to help you and easily, get the skid fixed into where it's got to be. So we'll flash that on the screen right now. You can pause the video or just take a look at that PDF that's on our website. All right, so we followed that instruction guide to the T in order of which bolts to get threaded in first. And it makes things really easy. And once you do that, catch a couple threads on every bolt, then you can start tightening everything up. So one more thing to note here is that depending on the year and model, this location here may or may not have a threaded insert from the factory. So we already thought this through for you. We provide a flag nut that you can feed through this open slot here in the frame, and your bolt also provided will line right up. You won't have to drill anything in this location. On the opposite side, where the transfer case is, you will have to drill. All right, so we just went around and snugged down all of the OEM bolts that fasten this skid plate up into the belly. One of the only things left here is up in the front of the skid plate. We've got a countersunk hole here. So when you're looking at this, you might be thinking, oh, well, I need to use an OEM bolt here because there's a threaded PEM here. The way we chose to design this skid, we provide you with a 2-inch long countersunk bolt. This is 3/8 by 16. And all this is going to do is feed right up through the factory PEM. You're going to take a flat washer that's provided and feed it up through the top slot, drop it on the bolt shank, and then start a nut. Then you can get a socket in from the top through that slot, and then use an Allen key to fasten this guy down. So we've got all the hardware where it needs to be. We are now going to move on to the transfer case skid plate. And that is going to be followed up by the oil pan skid plate. All right, at this point, these cross member components can be installed. All you're going to do is get it orientated as seen here, slide it up and back. You'll see that it's recessed, and that will help you align it in the cross member. All right, so in order to install the transfer case skid, this bolt here needs to be popped out real quick. Then we'll hoist the skid up into position, rethread the bolts in. This skid plate is absolutely installable with one person with the help of a jack stand. Now that we got it up pretty close to where it's got to be, you can just start a couple of the countersunk bolts. We're going to start at the cross member and then do a couple back by the skid support member. So we drilled the hole. Now we're just going to feed the provided flag nut through this slot in the frame. Line it up. All right, so now we are above the transfer case skid plate. We are going to install the 3/8 bolts at this seam here. Put a washer on the other side. And a nylon nut. So these 3 bolts here, once you tighten them up, it's really going to strengthen things and just kind of have a permanent bond between the new gas tank skid and the new transfer case skid. So we're going to go ahead, tighten that up, and you'll see this gap suck up pretty good. All right, we are flying through this install. We just got the transfer case skid all bolted up. You'll notice here in the back by the skid support member, we have a extra countersunk spot that wasn't used. So this is for our resonator skid plate. If you didn't buy that add-on, you don't have to worry about that spot. Now we can move to the front of the vehicle to install the engine skid. We're going to install the driver's side bracket here for the engine skid plate. We're going to use a large washer, 3/8 bolt, and a nylon lock nut. These guys just drop down. This one's a little tight. All you got to do is put it sideways. Now we'll bring the bracket up and into position. Let's get one of these guys started. And reach your hand up. Get the other one started. We're going to sneak our 9/16 wrench up above the motor mount. And then we are going to just get this nut a little closer, but do not tighten yet. So now we're going to mount the passenger side bracket. This mounts in a very similar fashion, but the bolt feeds in through the bottom of the bracket. Bring the bracket into position, followed by a flat washer and a nut. We're going to use a short 9/16 wrench and socket. The wrench will slip above the motor mount to hold onto the nut. And you can tighten the wrench. Okay, so before we lift the engine skid plate into position, let's take a quick look at how this is going to mount up to the existing setup here. We've got 3 countersunk holes. We're going to use 3/8 bolts to fasten this skid plate to the crossmember components. And then up at the front of the vehicle, we've got 2 holes on either side of the skid plate that are going to mount to the brackets that we've loosely installed. So we like to use a adjustable jack stand up front to rest the end of the skid plate on. While you bring this up into position, the skid plate will key in nicely. Grab one of your provided 3/8 bolts. Get that started. Then you can follow up with the other two. So we left those countersunk screws relatively loose. Now we're just going to use the jack stand to bring the skid plate up to the mounting brackets. We'll now use the provided 3/8 bolts and loosely fit these bolts through the bracket and into the skid plate. And you use a nylon nut on the other side. Just leave these loosely installed for now until you're ready to tighten everything down. It helps to leave the oil pan dropout removed while you're getting these nuts installed. That way you have another spot to reach up and get the nuts started. Now we're going to take a 9/16 wrench and 9/16 socket and go through and tighten down the skid plate bolts, followed by the bracket bolts on the motor mounts. Now all that's left is the oil dropout plate. This guy is just going to install from the top, and it'll align nicely with the cutout in the skid plate. These skids are installed and they're ready to take a beating. Now all that's left to do is to get in and hit the trail.